But I think that the Catholicism, that's as sane as people can get. We need a metaphysic, a narrative metaphysic to hold us together. And it has to be predicated on something that's transcendent and absolute.
All churches possess a level of truth. The Catholic Church is known to, and it's contained in the word Catholic, Catholicos, meaning fullness of spirit. It has the fullness of the truth. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where we are dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how smart people become Catholic, or there's a lot of smart people in the Catholic Church. I know there's a lot of criticism that the quote-unquote educated modern world thinks that Catholics are dumb, backwards, and that we worship an invisible man in the sky. But couldn't be farther from the truth. We actually use our intellectual abilities, powered by God, powered by His Holy Spirit, to discover truths that can't always be learned, even if you have a high degree of education, but it's only for those who are actually willing to pray for wisdom. So we're going to talk about people like Jordan Peterson and how he is learning about his about his wife's Catholic faith, and he's got some pretty impressive things to say, as well as some comments from Bishop Barron and, even Tucker Carlson. And then we're also going to look at a critique that an empiricist has against the Catholic Church. But before we jump into it, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. And trust me, it's the only way that we can overcome all of the algorithm suppression that happens, especially with Catholic content. And as always, please consider supporting us in our Patreon efforts, because it's the only way we can continue to dish out this faith, culture, and commentary and keep our staff working. So please, your generosity not only matters, it is most needed. And in this time of preparing for Christmas, consider making a Christmas gift to us here at the Father Leo Show. So let's just jump right into it with faith and smart people. There is no doubt that the Catholic schools produce some of the best students. There's just no doubt about that. And that's why people pay a lot of money, even if they're not Catholic, to send their children to Catholic schools, because we kind of founded, in a sense, the education system. I look at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton and how she was responsible for creating, in a sense, a parochial school system, even for people who were underprivileged, and particularly young girls. And we also know that Catholics have been movers and shakers. They are such movers and shakers on earth that they're recognized in heaven as saints. But let me just randomly list a few names, and this comes from Church Pop. The inventor of pasteurization is Louis Pasteur. Then we also have the father of genetics, Gregor Mendel. Then we have Saint Giuseppe Moscati, pioneer of treating diabetes with insulin. Louis de Broglie, he's a Nobel Prize winner in quantum mechanics. I mean, that's the stuff that that guy from The Big Bang Theory likes so much. And speaking of The Big Bang Theory, the founder of The Big Bang Theory is Father Georges Lemaitre. And then we have Jerome Lejeune, who discovered the cause of Down syndrome. And then we have Galileo Galilei, the father of modern astronomy. So you have a lot of smart Catholics who influence this world in very powerful ways. I think that we've got to realize that faith and science not only coexist, they are very complementary of each other. And that's why Jordan Peterson has this to say about Catholicism.
Catholicism, I've gone through lots of Catholic cathedrals in Europe, and of course they're stunning creations, but they're Gothic and strange, and the doctrine is eerie and complex and surreal. And the biblical writings are the same. You think of a book like Revelation, for example. But I think that the Catholicism, that's as sane as people can get. Broadly speaking, is that we need a metaphysic, a narrative metaphysic to hold us together. And it has to be predicated on something that's transcendent and absolute.
And he's absolutely right. Catholicism as kind of the fullness of Christianity. Now, all churches possess a level of truth. The Catholic Church is known to, and it's contained in the word Catholic, Catholicos, meaning fullness of spirit. It has the fullness of the truth. Now, does that mean that every Catholic knows the truth perfectly? No, they have to seek it out, and it has to be by God's gift and plan revealed. And that's why over the period of our church's history, God's been revealing the truths of himself over time. And even though all truth was contained perfectly and revealed perfectly in Jesus Christ, we're still learning about that. I mean, the scriptures are clear that there are not enough libraries in the world that can contain the truth of Jesus Christ. But just because you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ doesn't mean you know everything there is to know about him. So there's always a need for smart people. And smart people, if they are taking their faith seriously, it leads to Catholicism. But there has been, unfortunately, in the Catholic Church, some movements to kind of dumb the church's teachings down, which is not only a disservice to the church, it puts souls in peril, and it just has the exact opposite effect. You know, we're not trying to make the church relevant to people. We're trying to make people understand the relevance of the church. There's two different approaches to that. You know, while the incarnation shows how God came down to earth, it's only so that Jesus, who is God, can take us up to the truths of heaven. And so I like what Bishop Barron has to say here in this little conversation between him and Jordan Peterson.
If the church can no longer attract young people, it has to be that they're not taking that with sufficient seriousness. Now,
yeah, I think there's a lot to that.
I don't want to externalize the blame. It's like, I know the church is a human organization and all of that, but it's still evidence.
When I was coming of age, so back in, like, say, the 1970s, the presumption of the church was, we should make this thing as easy as possible, because if we make it hard, these people are going to run away. So we don't want to make it. We want to make it intellectually easy. So I got a very dumbed down Catholicism. It was through the grace of God that I discovered later in life the very rich Catholic intellectual tradition. But when I was going through school, including through high school, you know, banners and balloons and collages, and it was a very superficial. We got the clearer impression when I was a kid that English and science and math and all that were serious subjects. Religion was like gym, or it was like, you know, I don't know what else, like art class or something. It was considered not that serious. So we dumbed it down intellectually, and we lessened the moral demand, for sure, because we didn't want, I think, people to run away. And then, you know, I'll say it bluntly, rather pathetically, we tried to be as relevant as possible. That was the term from our time.
Right, and that's like the uncool guy at the party, man.
Right.
You know, if you have to strive to be relevant, you're not on the cutting edge, that's for sure.
Right. And so there's a study I read some years ago that I thought was very plausible. The conclusion was, what young people find compelling in a mentor figure are the two things. One is that the person knows a lot about the subject that he or she is sharing. And secondly, they're really committed to it. And when the kids sense those two things, well, there's a lot to know here, and this guy or this woman, they really believe it. They find that compelling. You don't need, you know, the games of relevance. You don't need to dumb it down. In fact, smarten it up and make it as intellectually challenging and morally challenging as possible.
And that is the truth. If we try to approach Christianity, and particularly Catholicism, by trying to make it relevant and dumbing it down, and trust me, what Bishop Barron talked about, I experienced that too. There was a lot of banners, there was a lot of collages, and you know, the moral issues were dealt with very relatively. And I can say that even in my Catholic high school, while we were told to learn religion in terms of facts, you know, memorizing things, it was never actually applied to real life situations. Now, granted, that was many years ago, but I can remember it not having as great of an impact. But what I found interesting was that the person who, in a sense, had the most religious impact on me just also happened to be the science teacher. I remember him. His name was Mr. Butch, because he had a really deep voice. And I'll be honest with you, he kind of dressed like a hippie, but he was the science teacher. But he also taught religion, which was kind of shocking. And his approach really helped me to understand. Now, that didn't mean I was a great believer, but helped me to understand that Christianity is something to be taken seriously. And Catholicism in particular, has so much wisdom to offer. And I honestly think that especially those who are fundamentalists in the Bible, I'm glad that they study the Bible, but they don't know everything, even if they've memorized it back and forward. But that is actually a form of intellectual degradation. If you memorize the Bible and can quote it, but you still don't fully understand what it means in light of all of Revelation, which is not just simply what you read today, but what it has meant for the entire Catholic Church for 2,000 years, then you're really not as intelligent in Christianity as you think. In fact, you kind of become more blind to it all. But I'm not here to, in a sense, criticize or pick a fight with Bible-thumping Protestants. Not at all. I'm glad that we can at least have a conversation on the same page about Christianity. What we've got to be aware of, are people who claim to be very intelligent, and they come up with kind of like slick-sounding arguments, but they're really not that smart at all, including something that I came across in my social media searches on this topic. We're going to jump into now what culture says about Catholicism and how we're not very smart whatsoever. Again, there is no doubt that the modern world, especially those who have a lot of degrees under their, name or next to their name, but really don't have a lot of common sense. They'll make arguments like this empiricist atheist who is basically saying that the Catholic Church really has no grounding in terms of moral objectivity. Listen to this.
On the other hand, we must remember, as the point that was made, is that the Church is very loose on moral evils, because although they try to accuse people like me who believe in the empiricism and the Enlightenment of somehow what they call moral relativism, as if it's some appalling sin, where what it actually means is thought, they, for example, thought that slavery was perfectly fine.
And so did all society.
Absolutely okay, and then they didn't. They thought until the year 2000 that a baby went to limbo, causing unbelievable distress to parents whose child died.
Okay.
Unbelievable distress. And then, with a wave of the hand and a stamp of a seal, it was no longer true. Something that had been eternally, or at least true for 2,000 years, suddenly wasn't. Because the truth is complicated. It's hard. And what is the point of the Catholic Church if it says, oh, well, we couldn't know better because nobody else did? Then what are you for?
Okay, so this empiricist, I don't exactly know who he is. I think his name is Mr. Fry. If you have an English accent and you always sound so offended, you're going to kind of get laughs and an applause as he did there. The two examples that he used are actually not accurate at all. So if we are going to talk about slavery, Christianity has always been against slavery. Jesus even talks about that. And if it weren't for Christians, slavery would continue in the modern ugly sense as it did, 200 years ago. So thank you to the Catholic Church, and you're welcome from the Catholic Church, because we are the ones who have consistently fought against slavery, never believed that it was a good thing. Not at all. In fact, we talk about the fact that we see ourselves only as slaves to Christ, not to each other. And that in Christ there's no east or west, free or slave. And so he's just wrong. His premise is 100% wrong. And then the whole thing about limbo, well, that's not true either. That's never been Catholic doctrine whatsoever. Might it have been a superstition that was promoted for pastoral reasons? And what do I mean by that? Well, it's because it was something that people said that's where babies go if they die in utero, if they die before birth, say stillbirth, which is so funny because even now modern people think that that's a form of abortion. You can't imagine just how dumber we've become by people like him. He's accusing the Catholic Church of saying that limbo was a teaching of the Catholic Church. It has never been a teaching of the Catholic Church. It was a technique that was used by well-intentioned people to make mothers and fathers feel better, actually, if their child died before being baptized. That's all it was. It was like maybe this baby, because this child wasn't baptized, because baptism is needed for salvation, that maybe this child is in limbo. It's not hell and it's not heaven. And until Christ delivers that baby from limbo, that's what the predominant belief was, but it was not official church teaching. So you should take umbrage to someone like that when they accuse the church of being stupid, because what he's just talking about, if we actually believe that, we would be stupid. We would be absolutely stupid, but we're not. We never taught that. So we have to be really careful of what we are being accused of believing. Jesus Christ is the authority in all of this. And so I think we've got to take him seriously, not what this man says about the Catholic Church. But I can honestly say that people get smarter when they approach death, when they approach sickness, when they are overwhelmed in sadness and in agony. And so what I love is how Jordan Peterson is learning more about Catholicism through his wife. And why? Because she was facing a very aggressive cancer, and apparently she experienced a real healing from a Catholic devotion, which isn't for little old kind ladies, but it's for people who are seeking to be smart and wise in the power of the Lord. She was healed because of a rosary. Check out this little story.
She had a very rare cancer, which was 100% fatal, and which generally conferred upon its bearer a lifespan of approximately 10 months.
My mother's family, they all died fairly young from cancer and different kinds of things. They put me in the hospital, and Queenie Yu came to visit, right?
When Tammy saw the rosary, she said, "Well, this is a rosary." And I was surprised. And I said, "You know what it is?" And she said, "Yes, but I don't know how to use it."
She would say the first part, and I would say the last part of each prayer.
Tammy spent time with her praying. When the hell of suffering, unjust suffering, opens up around you, you can make it much worse by also being bitter and resentful and ungrateful and shaking your hands at fate and God. Tammy didn't do that.
I wouldn't really even notice the pain that I was in as long as I prayed.
You don't know what the right outcome is, and maybe it's that you live and maybe it isn't.
So when I was in the hospital, Father Eric came to my apartment and he gave me the novena for the sick. It's the 5th day of praying the novena, and then the hole has healed itself.
Well, I don't know what to make of that. She's also, as far as we know, the only person who ever survived this cancer.
This is obviously impressive because when someone as intelligent, critical thinker as Jordan Peterson encounters a miracle, he doesn't know what to think of it, because there are just some things that are beyond us, because we are not omniscient. We can be scientific enough, we can be knowledgeable enough, but we are not omniscient. We don't know everything. And I think that's what we've got to do when we encounter a culture that is just so anti-Catholic. We have to approach this very humbly. And that's why I'm going to offer a commentary on how we can approach the arrogant modern world that just wants to accuse Catholics of being dumb, when in fact the smartest people who walk the face of this earth were Catholic. Here's my commentary. I love this because it's only when you're confronted with the deepest questions of life, like what's going to happen after I die, and how do I get through all of these struggles, whether it be physical, emotional, financial, all of the things that don't make life worth living. And yet there is a spirit in us that makes us keep going. And what is that? Well, that's just you thinking about the truth. And the truth is contained in a person named Jesus Christ. And I love this. Tucker Carlson kind of shares his thoughts on Christianity.
I just can't believe that in the end, when it really gets intense, as it is now, that it's Christians, it's people who actually believe the Bible, are the only ones with wisdom who understand what's really going on. They're not shocked at all. And they're not panicked either. They get it. It's so interesting. That itself is a biblical principle. The last shall be first. The humble among you will be exalted. Everything is the opposite of what you thought it was. Even if you're not a Christian, which I think you should be because it's true, but even if you're not, you can acknowledge, just having lived here for a while, that is absolutely the way things work.
There is nothing untrue that is contained in Scripture. In fact, it's such a powerful truth that it does require revelation, and the revelation means over a period of time. And so here's going to be some suggestions on how we can approach our Catholic faith more wisely so that we can be filled with wisdom, because that's what we are praying for. So one of the things is contained in the phrase by Benedict, Saint Benedict. He is the founder of Western monasticism, and he has this phrase for all of his community members: ora et labora. Ora is pray, et labora is and work. Prayer and work. We have to see that our prayer and our work are rooted in God. If we can do that, then we are going to grow in wisdom. The second thing that I would offer is to pay attention to the details of faith. And even you don't fully understand it. Like, for example, the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed that we say every Sunday. If I were to ask you to say that by yourself, I bet you would have struggle saying it. Pay attention to all those words. And if you don't understand it, then go ahead and seek it out. Pay attention to the details that are at the liturgy, at Mass. Pay attention to liturgical colors. Pay attention to people who you might not pay attention to normally. God might be actually using those moments to heighten our awareness of his presence, not in a pantheistic or polytheistic way. These people or these details in life aren't God, but could God use this? We say, smell the roses, or pay attention to the sunset, or to be able to even look at the details of our life, those details which we account for in our examination of conscience. These are ways that we can become wiser. Another thing is, a lot of people always like to limit holiness and wisdom to people who are perfect and sinless. And it is true, blessed are the pure of heart, they shall see God. And when they see God, they see wisdom perfectly. But that's where confession is such a gift to us. Go to confession and don't just simply examine your conscience and list your sin. Maybe take time to look at that sin in all of its facets and see what we can learn from it. Every sin is really an opportunity for a lesson in the spiritual life. We just can't be afraid of it. And then the final thing that I'm going to offer, so that we can all be smarter in our Catholic Church, is to trust in Jesus. That little simple prayer, Jesus, I trust in you. The whole divine mercy premise. It might sound absolutely silly, but the more we trust Jesus, the more he can actually reveal to us his plan. And it's usually a plan that happens in hindsight. I'm just going to give you a perfect example. On the Feast of Christ the King, I offered a homily, which, by the way, for our Patreon members, you can have access to that. In that homily, I kind of lay it out on the line between politics and the kingship of Jesus. Anyway, at the very end of Mass, a young man came up to me who I had met years ago, and he's a chef, and we had an incredible reunion. And we both kind of looked and thought to ourselves, wow, this is kind of odd how God planned for this to happen at this time in my life and in his. It was just a way for God to really reveal his plan for us. And it was a great, great gift. So we've got to trust in Jesus that even though we're not going to know the plan fully, he is revealing it to us in time. And the more we can trust him, the wiser we are. And I can honestly say, if people are going to ask me, do you think Jordan Peterson will ever become Catholic? I think he will. I really think he will. In a way, he might need to overcome some of his intellectual pride. Not that he is a proud man in a negative way, but he is on a journey. He might need to overcome some of that and get a little bit more simple. But also, I think that when he starts paying attention to what his wife is going through, man, is her intercession strong. And so I think that in time, Jordan Peterson will become Catholic. And I'm even going to dare say this. All Christians, whether you're Catholic or not, if you are taking faith seriously, you will come to accept the truth of the Catholic Church, even if you don't fully recognize it. And God will reveal that to you for sure. I hope that this episode gets you thinking about whether or not you need to approach the Catholic Church with a little bit more intellectual rigor, taking our doctrines and our teaching more seriously, but also making sure it just doesn't stay up here, but it winds up in your heart and manifested in your life. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. And please consider supporting us on our Patreon community, where you get access to some great content, but also some special perks. And it's the only way we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you, and stay hungry for God.